What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Bestial Frenzies podcast. I'm here with my Bestial Frenzy, Andy. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing well, and I'm here with my bestial frenzy Theo.
Whoa, it's still true. It's been a pretty big, exciting week in terms of GA things. I think we've got a lot of really interesting stuff to talk about. So let's start with some of the news that came out of this past week.
Yeah, big news. So they had their first ban restricted announcement where, surprise, surprise, nothing got banned and nothing got restricted.
hmm
But we do have a slight rule change that we'll see how it shakes up anything.
Yeah, so they updated the rule that said when you level up, your champion gets to like reawaken if it's asleep, which most notably changes specifically like how Dungeon Guide interacts with leveling up and how like Beseech the Winds interacts with leveling up. And then there's like a couple other like fringe cases. Uh, but the big ones are like Dungeon Guide mid turn doesn't wake you up now.
hmm
And I that's it's an interesting change. What do you think about it? Like in terms of how it impacts the game.
I personally like the rule change. One thing about this rule that we had talked about in the past, I wasn't sure on this, but it wasn't the most intuitive rule to begin with. Like leveling up, didn't really make sense to like wake up your champion. So it's not like because if you start playing this game, I don't think I would assume that as a rule. But like it doesn't really hurt any classes. The big thing it does hurt is Lorraine leveling up with infusion strategies. So now you can't
Mhm.
level up. So go from start your turn at level 1, go up to level 2, hit with a weapon, wake up with Dungeon Guide, and then all your infusions are free, and then swing for a ton again. Can't do that strategy anymore. In my opinion, I think it makes the game more fun going against Lorraine because you can now kind of tell when you're in danger of dying. When in the past, it's like
Right.
they could be at level 1 and you could be dead that same turn.
Yeah, I definitely think like Lorraine is obviously like the champion that takes the hit the biggest. But I also think, if you look at it, that specific scenario is one that unless you've specifically built your deck to abuse that interaction, it comes up like once every 4 or 5 games where you're actually like level 2 attack, level 3 wake up, infuse, 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 attack. Like you might get to play like one infusion or something, but I think it makes that deck feel a lot less high rolly, right? Like you're not playing against it, and your opponent's like, all right, level up, like Dungeon Guide, infuse 3 times, attack you for 15. You're like, oh, all right, like that,
Yeah,
nice hand, my guy. Uh,
it weakens that Ascension combo too. Like just getting your draw 2 sword back. It weakens that a lot because it's like you might like have 3 infusion in your hand. That's pretty hard, but like it gives you uh it gives you a lot of reach on the turn you level up if you ascend.
mhm. Yeah, and I think like the entire reason a card like Spirit's Blessing exists is to sort of enable that infusion combo style gameplay. So the
hmm
fact that you could just sort of skip that sort of important designed piece of like obviously the way that it's intended to work is you attack, you Spirit's Blessing, wake up, then you play your infusions, and it was like sort of just a way to get around that strategy as well. So I think it makes Spirit's Blessing a better card to actually play because in the past you're like, maybe I'll use it once or twice, but I actually probably don't need it at all. So now, like, if you want to play the same deck, you probably just have to slot in a couple more Spirit's Blessings, and you can still do the same thing. It just takes a couple different cards.
Yeah, I agree.
I know we briefly touched on that they announced that there was a ban and restricted list. And it was sort of as we predicted. They didn't ban any cards that weren't Fractured Crown cards that won't be legal either ever in standard or in the case of the one card they put on there. I think there's going to be a promo art of it coming out before Fractured Crown, but they want to make sure that that card's not legal until the rest of the set drops. So like that
hmm
was like a conditional ban. But what I thought was really interesting is the categories that they had put into the announcement,
The watch
basically.
list.
Yeah. Do you want to touch a little bit on like what the categories were, and we can talk about some of the cards that they had mentioned specifically?
Yeah, so they start with 3 categories. So it's like I can't remember if level 3 was the highest, but whatever the highest one is, it's like they're worried about these cards. They're really keeping a close eye on them. Level 2, it's like they're probably fine, but we'll see. And level 1 is just like they're on our radar. And the cards they identified of possibly being the most problematic are Sword of Avarice and Reckless Conversion. So Sword of Avarice is the draw two sword that, if you have it, you have the Ascension combo. It can feel like, you're getting a lot of cards. It might be hard for your opponent to come back from even just a single Ascension. So it might feel kind of unfair. Reckless Conversion is the one I think has the highest chance of actually being a problem.
Mhm.
Um, we'll see how it does next set because Tithes really stops that. The one you can only draw 3 cards a turn. But Reckless Conversion, when people are playing full combo Arcane Ray, which is literally draw your deck on turn 4, Reckless Conversion is the card that enables that. And Reckless Conversion, for those who don't know, it's put the top 2 cards of your deck into your memory, banish 4 of them, put the rest into your hand. So, if you have 7 cards already in your memory, you put 2 from your deck, you banish 4, you get 5 cards back. That's huge for one card.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I really liked about the way that they had mentioned those 2 cards specifically is that what ended up happening was it would lead to situations where your opponent starts playing these cards, and so right now, let's use like Avarice and Ascension as an example, right? Like your opponent, let's say they enter the recollection phase and they go Ascension Avarice, and then they Ascension Avarice, and they do this like 3-4 times combining Cruxites Avarices, and all of a sudden they've got like a 15-16 card memory. Like you sitting across from that, you're looking at that, you have to think to yourself, I'm probably losing the game this turn like 99% of the time. But I don't want to concede the game because I don't know whether or not they've drawn those pieces. And so you end up playing an extra like 10 minutes of gameplay that is literally just like, did you draw the one card that wins the game or not? And it's really frustrating to play against. And I think the same thing sort of applies to Reckless Conversion, where it's like you see your opponent start drawing a bunch of cards, and then they play Reckless Conversion, and you're like, I probably lose, but on the off chance I don't, I guess I'll stay in this game. And it can end up just like really dragging out turns that like have no need to be as long as they are.
Yeah, and it's not even that I think like these cards might necessarily be overpowered. It's just they're very unfun to play against in a lot of situations.
Mm-hmm. And I think another thing they identified was it makes for really like difficult decision trees, because all of a sudden, as you're drawing more and more cards, you as the turn player have to make more and more decisions based on the new information that you now have given the cards in your hand. And I know they mentioned it in like the Fractured Crown design notes, where they were like, sometimes when you have a hand that's 20 cards, it gets hard to remember like what you're trying to do, because you have to like
Mhm.
shuffle through your entire hand to find your cards. And they want to, sort of like restrict that style of gameplay where you just like build a giant hand and then just win. And so I think those 2 cards are good to be on a watch list. I agree that they're not like inherently broken, and some of the tools in the future might like restrict how powerful they are. But I agree that those 2 cards can lead to very frustrating gameplay.
Mhm.
And I know they want to avoid as much of that as possible.
Yeah, and I don't think they will end up banning anything before set 2 comes out anyway. And then they're gonna look at the set 2 meta, see how the store championship goes, like because they're never gonna have enough data until regionals happen,
Mhm.
and the regionals are back to back to back to back. So you don't want to see, oh, this deck is winning at like the first 2 regionals and then like ban a card out of it and just be like, oh, that deck that you bought to go to the regional in 1 week, yeah, you can't play that. And they
Yep.
said the next ban restriction announcement is on like the Fracture Crown release day. So I don't think anything is coming.
Yeah, and I've been talking to a couple people who are like, well, and they said when the next like update's gonna come out, like it's gonna be on that day, and I'm like, yeah, like it's mostly gonna be a formality to remove the one card from the list.
Yeah.
But if they feel they need to make any changes, or even if it's not like adding cards to the list, but maybe saying like, hey, these cards that we were monitoring, we're maybe bumping them up to like we're monitoring them a little bit more heavily now. But again, I really don't think stuff is going to get banned before regionals happen. and probably not even before Ascend happens. I'll be honest.
No, I don't think so. I don't think they're going to have nearly enough data to do it. They built set 2 with set 1 in mind already, so there shouldn't be too many surprises.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of those like category, I forget if it's 3 or 1, but whichever is like we're monitoring these cards from afar. There were 4 of them that were identified, and I think the way they had said it in the article was that uh, these cards are like unhealthy from a game design standpoint, just in terms of future cards. And either it's like it's hard to design cards with them in mind, either that or they're a little bit too efficient at what they do. And I think the 4
I looked
cards,
it up real quick.
yeah,
So, and it's category 3 is the highest. There's nothing in it. Category 2 is sort of average and reckless conversion, and you're talking about category 1
category
below
1,
it.
yeah. Yeah, so these are cards that they're like keeping an eye on that like could be problematic, aren't really, but they are very good cards. And I think the 4 on that list are Creative Shock, Tactful Sergeant, Varuk Smoldering Spire, and Freezing Hail, I think is the 4th one.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's interesting. I can agree that those cards are all individually powerful. Freezing Hail hasn't seen a lot of play yet, but I think their idea was with the new level up change, since Freezing Hail like doesn't let a unit wake up in its wake up phase. If they attack you with their champion and then you Freezing Hail them, they have to go an entire other turn without an attack, which against attack focused decks could be like very hard to play against. So it might just be too efficient at what it does as like a control tool. But the first 2 definitely I think make sense as like very efficient cards at what they do.
Yeah, Creative Shock maybe I could see. Tactile Sergeant being a 4 cost. Well, I get why they put it there, but it's a pretty underwhelming unit as it sits.
Mm-hmm.
With the requirement that you need to draw. I don't know. Maybe they have something in set 2 or set 3 even where Lorraine gets too much of a boost from that, but I don't see it with Taxful. Creative Shock, maybe it's a +0 at the end of the day. Maybe a +1 if you kill something. I mean, it could be a +2 if a floating memory. I don't know. It's good,
Mm-hmm.
but like if you take that away from Fire, I think Fire gets significantly worse than it is.
Yeah, and I do agree. Like Creative Shock is a very good card, but I don't think it's in here. Like the one deck that it feels the best in is Mage, which is where you get the class bonus to deal 2 damage. And I've even found myself in fire decks that aren't specifically Rye. I've been cutting my Creative Shocks because I'm like the cycle effect is fine, but what if I just play 4 more cards that I'd rather draw? Like rather than trying to dig for better cards, why don't I just play better cards instead of the draw card?
Yeah, it's
So
really good. To go on, sorry.
no, you continue. Yeah, I
It's
was on.
really good in like specifically Fire, right? Like where either like you're playing Erupting and you want to fire your cards in your discard pile already, and you want to find your Erupting, you want to find your Ember Song, and in Arcane, where again you just want to find your more important cards and cycle through your deck. But with like rush decks like Fire Xander or Quick Lorraine, like you kind of want it still to like find your Rending Flames and stuff, but it's not as important.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a card that is like meant for combo decks rather than other decks. It like helps you assemble your pieces that you're looking for, um, and outside of that, it doesn't do too much. Um, I agree with the analysis of Tactical Sergeant. I think that card having the requirements that it has for cost, you have to have attack that turn, like, and then you get to draw a card into memory. Like it's not so efficient that it's too good. It is definitely a good card and one of the better tools that Wind has, but Wind already does not have a lot of genuine tools to
Yeah,
plus on card advantage. So I think that is a perfectly fine card to just like leave it for. The one interesting one, I think, is definitely Varuk, the domain. Uh, and I think this one is probably on the watch list more from a design standpoint, because Varuk just says damage from fire sources cannot be prevented. And I think as they're moving forward and they're working on slowing down the game, a lot of defensive tools are going to inherently be like prevent X amount of damage or prevent this. And if Varuk just says, no, you can't, it makes it harder to play around that. And I think one of the points that they had mentioned in that article as well was that the most of the domains like are balanced by their upkeep cost, where you can't materialize. But Varuk is a card where it gives you instant value, where you play your Varuk and then you play your fire card that you don't want to be prevented, and then you can sack the Varuk next turn and it's fine because you got your damage already.
Hmm.
And so that's an interesting, like, from a design standpoint, not even from a gameplay standpoint. It's just hard to design cards when there's a card in format that just says that card doesn't work.
Yeah, I think Varuk on this list probably has the highest chance of actually getting banned, even though I think it as it sits right now, it's the worst card on the list. But for exactly what you said, I think it limits a lot of design space, especially because looking at set two, like you said, the game's slowing down a lot. It feels like, and Varuk just kind of being an ace in the hole in a slow format might be too much.
Yeah, like you could maybe just build towards like I'm going to have a turn where I deal 25 damage to you and you lose, and on that turn I'm going to play a Varuk down so you can't prevent it. And
Hmm.
it's like, yeah. um, but I think that's like, I really like the communication that they gave us about like what cards they're watching, why they're watching them, when the next list is coming out. I really, really appreciate that communication as a player. Just like know sort of what's going on and what they're thinking about. It's just very nice to know that they're definitely thinking about, the player experience and making sure everyone feels like they're well informed and in the loop. So I appreciate what they're doing on that front.
Yeah, and Greg Archive has always been about transparency with their top reports and these articles. I think it's really refreshing from a player standpoint to, like you said, not only know when the next ban list is coming, unlike in Yu-Gi-Oh, where it could be literally at any time,
During a
and
tournament.
and them having reasons for this is what we're doing, this is what we're keeping an eye on. Where it's like you might be. I don't think again. We've been playing pretty competitive GA for a decent amount of time. I've never been like Creative Shock's too good, Tactical Sergeant's too good, but them at least being like these cards are good. We're going. This is why we're keeping an eye on them.
Yeah, and I also think, like, because they detailed these cards are potentially problematic with future cards, it might just mean, like, while they're on their cruise ship testing set 3, they might be like, ooh, all of a sudden in set 3, Tactical Sergeant's crazy. Like, maybe this card's
Yeah.
too good in set 3, but, like, right now it's fine. Because they're obviously, like, way ahead of us when it comes to, you know, playing the game in general, because they just are testing cards for, the new sets.
Hmm.
Do we have any other big news?
No, I mean, Wenginals finally got their registration open, which looks like a really big, cool event. But I mean, if you're really cool, you're going to come to the Yeti Gaming Regional.
That is true. Yes, all the coolest
but
people will
but
be.
no, they got that up, so all of the regionals now have the registrations open, and all of them are looking like they're going to be great.
Nice. Oh, they also did. They did post the application for the store championships as well.
Oh, they did, yeah.
So that I believe the window of those is in like the same window as the regionals. It's like the July 29th through August 25th.
Yeah, it's all
So
before FTC because FTC will get another store championship.
yeah, it's a part of the Dawn of Ashes season. So yeah, so that'll be exciting. I don't know exactly how long it'll take before they like approve any stores or like anybody like actually fully announces what those things are, but it's just really exciting to like actually have a competitive outlet for this game now. I feel like we've been playing it for a long time, just like as competitive as locals can be. It's like you really feel like you want to be playing for something a little bit bigger. And now that we're finally getting into the regionals and store championships and Ascent and like everyone's getting really hype about all the competitive stuff, it's super exciting to see.
Gonna be awesome. It's a little melancholy having to head judge the St. Louis regional because I would really like to play.
You'll just have to go win a different regional.
Going to Houston.
All right, let's talking about regionals. Probably a really good time to segue over into our meta manipulation segment. Let's talk about some decks. We had some really interesting ones show up and really really performed well in the past couple Yeti tournaments. You want to talk about them?
Yeah, so we didn't get to talk about them last week, so we're gonna go through the decks that went undefeated at the 615 Yeti webcam local and the one that was just a few days ago, the 622. So the 615, we had two undefeated decks. We had a Water Lorraine build, and we had a Fire Xander build. Fire Xander just level 2, no Luxem, which I feel like how the deck should be played, because you're just trying to kill them as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Water Lorraine was really interesting. The card that really stands out to me, and these links will be in the description, is 4 Weaponsmith.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. That card, I don't. Do they? What sword were they probably really targeting with that in the material deck? It's just like whatever's on
So
the
it's
field.
interesting because yeah, they're using Crux Knight, so they are using the one very specifically for Onsol. They're an Onsol deck, but as silly as it is, any of them, but they also have a Clarence in
Ah,
their main board.
that's what I was really hoping when you said 4 weaponsmith. I was like, I hope there's a Clarent in there because that's sweet.
Yeah, so Clarent, maybe they stack counters on the Clarent. I'm not 100% sure, actually. I think it's just really cool. They have 3 Banner Knights, 3 Frostborn Paladin, 4 Dungeon Guide, and 2 Veteran Soldier, and then just kind of like a standard Water Lorraine package. You got your Tide Diviners, you got your Ascensions. I think it's really interesting. I think it's a really cool looking deck.
I think that the weaponsmith Clarent package, it might be a little slow, but it also could potentially be really most effective against like the Rye decks, because they don't really have a lot of on-board clear for your weaponsmiths, and if you just like stack a Clarent on board and you keep giving it counters over and over again, by the time they get to Arcane Blast you might just be able to remove enough durability counters to just blank their damaging spells.
Yeah, because I know a lot of Fire Eyes are running Purge and Flames, and a single Clarent on board, like Purge and Flames only does 3, so one Clarent, that protects your whole board.
Yeah, and like that, if that's their clear, or if they've got Anger of the Skies as well, but they have to be level 3 for that. And that's just
Clarent comes up
2
with 2.
clear. Yeah, and it's a really interesting tool because it does protect your board, and it could make for a really interesting like alternate game plan. And also, I'm assuming that they play some count of dispersion in a Crux Knight Onsol deck.
Actually, no, they do not. They don't
Oh,
run any dispersion, not even in the sideboard. They have
interesting.
here's their Crux cards. So it's 4 in Soul, 4 in Fusion, 4 Ascension, 3 Cruxite, 3 Spirits Blessing. So it's also possible it's there just to put more counters on your swords, so you can do like maybe like a double Spirits Blessing turn or something.
Yeah, I mean that's still really cool. I am personally a very big proponent of playing at least some dispersion in non-soul decks. I really love that card, especially when you're playing Crux Knight. Um, but I know plenty of other Water Lorraine lists that have done very well without it in main board. So it's by no means an instant include. I just really like the card.
But I think we should also mention this is a 4-0 water list.
Yeah,
This
let's
is an
go
undefeated water
water.
list. It was a field of over 20.
Water bad. Water worst element. Bad deck. Bad type. Uh, Also notably the other deck. I mean, Fire Xander with no Luxem. It's a pretty like standard looking rush deck. Accurate. You're just trying to kill your opponent as fast as possible. I really like this deck. Um, I've been playing a similar version of it since before Alter came out. I love that deck, and I'm glad that it's finally getting some rep because I think it's very very good. It's especially very good into the mage decks, into like Ryan
Yeah,
stuff.
great into Rye, and maybe with this rule change, we might see people start moving a little further away from Lorraine just because it loses a little bit of that explosiveness to go from 1 to 3 and kill your opponent. And if more people are playing Rye, Fire Xander does very very good against Rye.
Yeah, that it is genuinely one of the fastest decks like available. It's just like the biggest threat to it so far was that if you go too wide on your board and Lorraine cleaves over it, not only has Lorraine probably drawn a bunch of cards, but also you lose all of your damage output, and you've gone so far negative in advantage that you're like, I just probably lose this game. But
Yeah.
if Lorraine loses a little bit of popularity or a little bit of speed, I definitely think this deck could like show up in a big way.
I agree. So let's move on to this most recent week real quick. So we got 2 winning decks. We have Matt got another 4-0, and he is running a very interesting. So it's a fire deck. But I can't say it's Fire Lorraine or it's Fire Rye because it's both.
Mm-hmm.
He runs level 1 Lorraine, level 2 Lorraine, level 1 Rye, and level 2 Merlin. And I was talking to someone who he beat, and they were on Win Lorraine, and they just had a problem because like he just stayed his spirit and was just kind of just ramping up doing fire things. And then the moment he saw like an opening, like he needs to, go to Lorraine and sweep the board with flame sweep, he does it. And if he's not being threatened by you going wide, then he goes to Rye, and then he starts fireballing you and starts creative shocking you and just like gets the job done. And he does have he is playing 4 Embersong for Erupting Rhapsody, but he's also playing 4 Firing Momentum. So if he goes into Lorraine or he stays at 1 and he sees he has this in his hand, it's another option for him to just start killing you with the fire in his graveyard.
Yeah, I think it's a really, really cool deck. That you're playing, you're playing split classes. It's just like situational. When do you want to go into one? Because I think the issue that just like a straight mage erupting deck has is that you're pretty negative into like we are just talking about like Fire Xander. They just go faster than you, and like that the classic erupting deck doesn't really have the ability to play like a Purge and Flames. You're not really hitting that efficiency mark very easily. And I think to remedy that, you're just like, all right, well, I'm playing Lorraine now. Flame Sweep.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
It's like you either need to go wide and risk just getting got by me, or you need to not go wide and risk me going from Lorraine into Merlin and just killing you with all my mage spells.
Yeah, I think it's a
He's
very cool deck.
3 Fireball.
It's a sweet
awesome.
deck. It's a really cool deck. And then
and we're going from this cool deck into the next cool deck.
Yeah. So the other undefeated deck from this past Thursday tournament was a hybrid erupting Sylvie / like Allen deck. So erupting Tamer, but half of the deck was also just like beast animal beatdown. So like it's a hybrid of playing like the very powerful fire beasts. Like you got like Embertail Squirrel, you got Blazing Direwolf, your big attackers, and then you can finish the game with an Embersong erupting if they're too busy dealing with your creatures. It's like a really cool hybrid playstyle there.
You also get Flute in this deck. So even if you don't find the Embersong, or you want to use the Embersong to buff your guys, that's +2 attack as a tamer, you have that option with Flute in your deck. It's really interesting, like, because I'll kind of go through the list real quick, just like verbatim. So it's 4 Grey Wolf, 4 Blazing Direwolf, 4 Embertail Squirrel, 4 Young Beastmonder, 4 Fervent Beastmaster, 4 I can't read, Energetic Beastmonder, 4 Gildas, 2 Spurned Ash, 2 Blazing Throw, 4 Erupting, 4 Embersong, 4 Cremation Ritual, 4 Increasing Danger, 4 Creative Shock, 4 Tempered Steel, and 4 Hasty Messenger in the main. So I kind of skipped around, but I think it's cool that he plays one sort of Seeking, so he has an out for those Blazing Throws.
Yeah. Blazing Throw is a very, very efficient card in decks like that.
It's insane.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's really cool. And we're going to actually he made a video on it on YouTube, so we're just going to put a link to that in the description.
Awesome.
Come on.
Let's go. Yeah. I was one thing that I noticed when I was looking through the list too is I really like some of the neat synergies that are just like built into the deck, sort of, maybe by accident even, because I know he was saying a little bit that like actually playing Gildas was a little weird with like the different cards that were in the deck. But something that I was thinking about when I was looking at the list, I was like, oh, Gildas actually has some really cool synergy with Embertail Squirrel, where you can like attack and then discard a card from your hand to like fix your hand size without playing any cards to the field. And so if you're like, I need to play this, like my hand's 8 cards, I'm gonna play this Gildas for 3, but that'll leave me with 4 cards in hand. It's like, well, if I attack with my Squirrel first, I go down to 7, then I play my Gildas. Now I'm balanced, and my Squirrel just did more damage, and I just got +1 fire card engraved for erupting. It was like a win-win-win. And I think some of those like neat interactions are just really cool.
Also gives like this deck is really interesting because it has a really unique defense against like flame sweep in the sense that with energetic or not energetic beast or young beast spawner, you can just get some of your beasts out of range. To where like if you put a blazing direwolf on, you go to 1, maybe you don't have anything else to do. This is a really weird. This probably isn't how it plays out, but just an example. So go, that's level 5 beast spawner. You get it's a 7/7. You know, that's hard for Lorraine to kill, and it kind of lets you go wide with the threat that if they flame sweep you, they're taking 7 back and probably not even killing that ally.
Yeah, it's really cool. I think like the buff counter ally decks with that like retaliate rule change that happened a while back, with Pride, really says like cleave my board. I dare you. Like you might draw some cards, but you also might take 10 damage in turn. And it's like is it worth it?
Yeah, and the other thing is like I always tell people this when they're like, yeah, my deck loses to cleave. Your deck does lose to cleave, but they have to have that cleave still.
Yeah. Yeah, you force them to have it, and you force them to have it on the right turn. And also, when you're playing something that is like very clearly an erupting deck, they might not feel safe to level up into 2 because they feel like they need a lantern. And if they do that, you're like, cool, I just bought an extra turn. I still have spurns if I need them. Or one of the things I like about this style of deck is that if they lantern you, you're like, all right, that's fine. I'm just still going to kill you with ally beatdown. I don't need my erupting combo. I just have it in deck just as an additional win condition.
Yeah, it wastes them a turn. And there's something still to be said with Alan. You know, when you're Alan, you probably also have like a flute or you have like a Beast Binders in play. Erupting still does 5 damage even with Lantern in play.
Yep. That still just deals your level and damage, which is like pretty good.
That's big. That's huge. And I was really excited to see this deck 4-0 because like we've seen kind of people try the erupting Alan archetype before, but it's always been like I'm playing Erupting Rai, but I'm playing Shout at Your Pets. And it's the same thing. But this is a very much a hybrid deck.
Yeah, and I really like taking elements from like different styles of builds and mashing them together and just being like, does this work? And I think the answer, at least on Thursday, was absolutely yes, it does work.
It's crazy that people are coming up with new deck ideas that are succeeding in a solved meta. That's a joke.
Meta solved. Dungeon Guide
but yeah,
OP.
no, that's really awesome. We'll put a link to his YouTube so he can explain a little better than us. But congratulations to him. Super cool deck.
Yeah, I think all 4 of these decks were really very interesting and like new-ish. I mean, like the most standard deck that we had from the 4-0s the past 2 weeks was the Water Lorraine, and even then, Water Lorraine has like fallen off the face of the earth in terms of popularity compared to the other 2 Lorraines, especially. So it's like, you know, you can do well with a lot of different archetypes. And
yeah, and we have highly competitive people playing in these events. It's not 20 people playing starter decks. It's 20 people playing to play. It's just a different meta than it might be from other people's locals and stuff. And I think that's really, really cool. It gives people a place to innovate.
Yeah, and I love all the work that people are doing on like either creating new concepts or just like building on the same list over and over a couple of weeks, just being like, what didn't I like last week? What 2 cards am I going to change this week? It's just really cool. I really like giving like some of the creative players an outlet to make cool things.
Yeah, and if you want to be a part of these tournaments, link in the description. Yeti Gaming Tournament server every Thursday, except this Thursday, because we're a little out of town, and then I'm at Anime Expo and all that. So no podcast next week, no tournament next week. But the week after, we are running an event. $5, 3 entire event kits in the prize pool.
Whoa, 3 whole kits. That's crazy. Yeah, I think that's what we got for our like meta discussion. And we already talked a little bit about how the rule change affects some of the decks specifically. I think like Fire Ascension combo and Wind Ascension combo Lorraine are the ones that got hit like the hardest. But also you can just like sub like 2 cards out of those decks and then they play perfectly fine. It's like it's not that big of a deal. All right, you want to talk
But
about
yeah,
some market stuff?
yeah, not a lot of market this week. I expected value of altar, foils. Down below $50. We're starting to see that kind of creep down a little bit. 49.33. It's interesting because we actually have sold a lot on our website recently. I think in the past, week and a half, we've sold about $1,500 worth of altar foils. But TCG player, still kind of slow. There's a lot of cards that just have no foils listed, especially in like the rares and the uncommons, and a lot of cards that like I think Beseech the Wind had 2 total copies. So it's like you can't
Mhm.
bling out your deck. So it's like it's weird. I think the reprint of Alter is going to bring the bad card value down on foils, like some of the bad foil commons going to drive it lower. But I think it has some potential to drive the good cards even a little higher, just because now people have the option to actually bling out their deck, and that demand is there, and more people jumping into the game with the reprint.
Mhm.
But non foils, 79.45 expected value from the box. That's what you, on average, will pull in value from your Alter booster box if you open it. This is not including, cards like under 50 cents, no uncommons, no commons, some uncommons, but not under 50 cents. So the total expected value of altar boxes right now, it's a little lower than last week, $128.78, but it's still above the price of a booster box. No real big market changes in terms of like price fluctuations, just kind of everything settling where it wants to.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's crazy that the EV is still above box price even after all this time. I feel like a lot of games, even established games, will have sets like really hype on release and then they'll die out pretty fast of like how much people actually want them. But like the cards in this game are still selling, people still want them, and it's a really good sign.
I agree.
Any like random neat tidbits of info on the market this week like you had last week, or is it kind of just a boring week all things considered?
It's just kind of a boring week, nothing really going up. Is that like there's a couple cards going down like 50 cents, a dollar. It's everything just kind of settling. We're still seeing a lot of like purchases of like in this last week. I think it was like 18 Grand Crusaders rings sold from Alter. So people are still interested in the game. People are still buying in. It's just on some of like the worst cards, it's just settling down.
Yeah, and maybe also part of that is a lot of people, because I know this is pretty true at like our paper locals at least. It's like a lot of people have started feeling really comfortable in what decks they want to play a lot. And so rather than people needing to continue to buy new cards to make new decks and so on and so forth, they're like, I've got like my 2 decks and I'm just gonna keep working on those decks, so maybe I only ever need like 1 card at a time. And there's just less overall demand for as many new cards as there was previously.
Yeah, for sure. It's like we keep saying it. More people will jump in when the Alter reprint comes. We're kind
Absolutely.
of just in a little bit of a waiting period.
Yep. But still looking good all things considered, so pretty
No,
happy with
yeah,
that. Yeah.
very thrilled. But yeah, I think that might be all we have this week.
Yeah, I think that is big week in terms of news, but otherwise, pretty normal stuff.
Quiet, too quiet.
Too quiet. Spoilers when.
But all right, everyone have a good night. I might do a little bit of a vlog at Anime Expo. If you're there Monday or Tuesday, I'll probably be around the GA booth all day, so come find me. But yeah, hope everyone has a good one.
See ya.